Rhino poaching across Africa saw a significant decrease during strict COVID-19 lockdowns. But as the restrictions loosened, poachers intensified their onslaught on the threatened species, with South Africa hardest hit. To discuss this further, we are joined by anti-rhino poaching activist Wayne Bolton. Wayne, good evening and thanks for joining me tonight. Now, we know that the fight against rhino poaching has been ongoing for years, but in the bigger scheme of things, it really doesn't seem to be making much of a difference. Is this accurate?
Yeah, I would say it is. I must say it doesn't look like we're making much headway. If I look at the rhino poaching figures, as we sit this year, we're on 259, or we're on 259 poached animals as of June this year. So we're back to the 2019 figures prior to COVID, but obviously we have less animals to poach as well. So one would expect a dramatic decrease. You've got places like Kruger that are sitting with basically 75% less white rhino than they had 10 years ago, and 51% less black rhinos. So we're in serious trouble as far as our rhino conservation is concerned.
75% less and 51% less than 10 years ago they're really alarming figures. What are we doing wrong here? I mean, I don't understand why there doesn't seem to be any end to poaching.
Yeah. To be honest, it's a difficult difficult question to answer. And it really requires a multifaceted solution to it. But I really wish that more would be done in terms of the government interventions. They are, after all, the custodian of our natural heritage. And the proof is in the pudding. They've been working at this for many years, and the animal is really in serious decline based on what we see in Kruger, certainly in that park, which holds 30% of the world's rhino. They'll be extinct in Kruger in the next 4 years unless something is done. So government really has to take the lead. We can't have the bureaucracy that we see with things like Skukuza Regional Court being closed and then delays in reopening it, or slow controls on their own housekeeping of their staff, for example. And I say that with the greatest respect to the state parks staff. They are, on the whole, mostly really heroes doing a great job. But we all know from reports in the media that there are some bad apples that the syndicates get to, and it's really about time that the government did something to sort that out. And I know that Major General Jooste refers to that as integrity testing, basically your polygraph testing of staff and so on. But we need drastic measures now. We're at a critical point, and unless government gets involved and pumps more funding into state reserves, private reserves, we're really going to see rhino extinct in the next few years.
Let's get into two things you said there: government interventions. We see countries like China really going out of their way to ensure the preservation of pandas. We see the same thing in Australia with koalas. What is government doing wrong, and what is it that they need to do to ensure that this is the case in South Africa for the rhino?
Yeah, I just think there's a lack of will, to be honest. And I'm sure that there is a lot that is being done by government behind the scenes. So we do see pockets of success. So, for example, there have been quite a few arrests. I think it was 69 up until June this year, and some really stiff sentences as well. Just recently, 52 years for somebody called Sipho Khoza, although 34 years of those are running concurrent sentences. But so there's pockets of success, but I just see the decline of the population, and I can only attribute it to a lack of will and a lack of control in the areas or the spaces where rhino are very vulnerable. So something needs to be done. There's a lot of talking that takes place with these things, but there needs to be some decisive action. For example, removing rhino out of the vulnerable areas and into safe areas or sanctuaries where they can be kept safe, or dehorning projects, finding a way to support the private reserves that are doing an excellent job of conserving our rhino up to this point. So there's just action that needs to be taken, besides what I said earlier about the staff control and so on. But at this stage, there's a lot of talk, but nothing really is happening.
Do you think that cost is one of the major factors here? That pricing, budget, financing somehow plays a massive role in the political will to move this forward?
I do, Shadika. You know, we're fighting a war now that costs a lot of money. So, for example, one of the immediate things we can do to save our rhino is to dehorn them. It's a sad fact of life, but it is something that we can do, and it's expensive to dehorn rhino. Often requiring helicopters and so on. But, you know, these things require money. Relocating rhino requires money. And the parks are really battling on. I think we've all seen that in some of the state parks as well, who are doing a tremendous job under the circumstances. So, yeah, I really believe that funding is a prohibitive factor right now. Anti-poaching and the technology that is required to safeguard our borders, especially on the border with Mozambique, requires a lot of funding, and at this stage, it's not there at all.
So you've spoken about government interventions. What about those people, those of us who are perhaps sitting at home, who potentially think that assisting in this fight against rhino poaching is just so far away from our immediate circumstances? What can we do? What small steps? Are there any small steps that we could take to make a difference?
Yeah, I truly believe that this battle is going to be won by the ordinary people of South Africa. You know, we're such a resilient nation, and we just need to find solutions that are inclusive of everybody. So obviously one of the immediate things that come to mind is the communities on the border of parks, where we need to create a sustainable relationship with the parks itself. So some basically translated to the people that are living on the borders of parks need to have a living from the parks and rhino and so on, a sustainable income, job creation and so on. And members of the public can help with that. You know, corporates can invest in terms of corporate social responsibility. Many of the non-profit organizations can give tax breaks or Section 18A certificates for investment of that nature. So business people can certainly get involved, and ordinary people, you know, citizens of this country, teach your children about the importance of rhino conservation and get involved, learn about the issues or the rhino conservation issues, rally behind those that are working tirelessly for our rhino, the rangers and so on, give them support. And, you know, if you see suspicious activity, then get hold of the environmental crime hotline. And if I can just mention what that is, Shadika, it's 0800 205 005. Phone them and do something about it. Don't just stand by, because ultimately a dead rhino will add nothing to our economy.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Wayne, and sharing those very sobering figures with us as far as rhinos go. That was anti-rhino poaching activist Wayne Bolton sharing with us some really scary figures. He mentioned something like, in 4 years' time, the Kruger National Park is facing a very real possibility of the extinction of rhinos. And if a figure like that doesn't scare you, then I'm not sure what will.